Hello and welcome to another video from me, the History Tutor, and in this lesson I'm looking at the America topic for AQA, and we're going to look at women in the 1920s and the interpretation question. So the AQA exam has 3 interpretation questions on paper 1, particularly for this America topic and the topics like Russia and Germany. And in these questions there are 2 questions about the message within the interpretation, what message it has, and then why it has this message, and then it has question 3, which interpretation is most convincing. So in this lesson we're going to look at question 1 and 2 whilst revising and understanding our knowledge of women in the 1920s. So firstly, let's have a little reminder of our knowledge of women in the 1920s with a little quiz. Okay, so here's a quiz about 1920s. So some of the questions about women and some about sort of wider life for fashions and music and film. Obviously things that still impact life for women, but also general things about life in the 1920s. Okay, so have a look at those questions. You can pause the screen, have a look through the revision guide, have a look through your notes, and try and find the answers to these questions. Okay, away you go. Okay, so here's some answers then. So what percentage of college graduates married their first sexual partner in the pre-war USA? So 80%. So a great suggestion that the life of women is very much based on conservative values. There wasn't huge amounts of change for women. There weren't suddenly lots of freedom and they were going off having lots of independence. They were still having a very conservative lifestyle without much freedom. That tend to be marrying people they sort of knew from a young age, etc. So when did women gain the vote? 1920. So similar to Britain, the idea of helping out in the First World War, gaining the vote. And then we get things like the Women's Party campaigning for more things in the 1920s as well. So the flapper obviously is the famous sort of woman of freedom in the 1920s. So what were some of the features? Obviously short hair, wearing long beads, a short skirt or dress, wearing makeup. So things that were sort of challenging to the conservative values where they were covered up and wearing longer clothes. They weren't wearing makeup. They were very demure. They were very conservative in how they looked. So name 2 types of dancers from jazz clubs. Obviously, you know, the flapper would go to these dance clubs. So what sort of things would they be involved in? So things like the Charleston, the one step, the black bottom. So all things that were fashionable things to be involved in these clubs. So modern convenience helped women, of course. So how much did refrigerator production increase? So that's one example of something that helps women in the 1920s. So that was 150%. You've also got vacuum cleaners, the sort of Hoover models. You've got the chest freezers starting to emerge. You've got washing machines. All these things helping women have a little bit more time. Okay, so on to something about films now. Obviously, you know, families would go off and watch films, etc. So, name the code that censored films. So that's the Hays Code. So obviously, it made sure that the values within the film were still very conservative. So there wasn't to be a promotion of sort of sex or adultery. It was very much within sort of conservative values. There wouldn't be long sort of kissing scenes, things like that. So very sensible ideas shown in there. The first talking film was the Jazz Singer, and how many people went to cinema every week? So 100 million. So a big family time to go out and go to the cinema. Okay, so we've got 2 types of questions here, but we're going to look at. We're going to look at question 1 and question 2. So question 1, it looks like this. It says, how does interpretation B differ from interpretation A about the changed life of women in the 1920s? Explain your answer based on what it says in interpretation A and B. Now, if you've got my revision guide, you can see the interpretations there. Otherwise, I'm going to show you what they look like in a moment. So what makes a good answer? Have a think about what the wording in the question says, how many marks it is, what's going to make a good answer, and list some ideas. Really useful to have an idea about how to answer the questions. It's the difference between a grade 4 and a 5 and a higher grade. If you have lots of knowledge, you can get a 4 and a 5. If you know how to answer the questions and really meet the criteria, you can get above that and tick all the boxes for the mark scheme. So this is an important thing to consider. So pause me now, have a think about the question wording. What do you think you need to do to answer it successfully? Okay, so come up with some ideas. So here's some ideas. So you need to write a summary of A, interpretation A, and suggest the message first of all. Then write a summary of B and suggest the message. Okay, you then might need to give a concluding sentence about how they are different. Okay, so the skill we're doing here is suggesting the meaning of what the historian is saying or what the person is saying. In this question, we don't need to use provenance or use our own knowledge at all to explain our answer. It doesn't need any of that. We're just trying to say what the message of the extract is. So let's practice this now looking at the interpretations. So have a read through A and see if you can summarize what the key message is. So pause me now and give it a go. Okay. And have a look through B now. And again, read through and see if you can summarize the message. And then we'll compare what I've got with some of your ideas. Okay, so here's what I've gone for. I've said that interpretation A is the key message is the lives of women were not more independent. Women still had to work hard at home and lacked independence. Whether middle class, a farmer, or a working class, they still did not have great independence. Whilst B has a different message, it says the lives of women changed as some wealthy women stopped following the traditional ideas of the past and had more independence. So they're picking out the ideas that people in the 20s could start to enjoy themselves. They had a great life. They took on new fashions. So some of those phrases that are in there. So how do we write this? So let's give this a sort of go at writing, shall we? So firstly, we're not going to do necessarily a P or answer like I talk about in my other videos. We're going to more give a message and a suggestion. So we're going to make sure we give inferences, okay, and then answer the question that way. So we want to say, first of all, interpretation A says, and give a sort of general summary of what it says, and then what that suggests about life for women in the 1920s. Being that the question asked you about the change in life for women in the 1920s, what's this tell us about the life for women in the 1920s? Okay, so have a look back at interpretation A in your revision guide. Have a think about the message we just come up with. Okay, you can flick back to this video if you don't have a revision guide of mine and work out how you'd summarize the source and give a suggestion of its meaning about changing life for women. Okay, pause me now and give it a go. Okay, so here's my idea. I've said interpretation A says women found life tough, whether they were middle class farmers or working class women. So this suggests that life for women in the 1920s did not change, as they still had to spend hours running the house and they also had to work to help their husbands. So you see what I've done? My suggestion is the sort of wider meaning. Okay, I have to sort of apply a little bit of my understanding of the topic. Doesn't need any great knowledge, but it definitely needs my understanding. Okay, so now apply this to interpretation B. Summarize what it says and then suggest the meaning with your understanding of the topic. Okay, got your answer down? So here's my idea. It says whilst. Now, whilst is a good word, so it's obviously I'm linking to it alternatively. I'm saying that the other one has a different idea. So whilst interpretation B says that women wanted to have fun and went out socializing as flappers. This suggests life in the 1920s America changed as some had the money to go to clubs, try new fashions, and live an independent life not controlled by men. Okay, so again, I've shown my wider understanding of the causes of things like flappers and women being more independent. Not any specific knowledge, but just good understanding. So now I could just give a summary sentence just to clinch the marks, make sure the examiner's clear on what I'm saying. I think it's pretty obvious, but I recommend giving just a final summary sentence, take you 30 seconds, just to round off the difference between them. Okay, so you say something like, therefore, there are different views as, okay, and give it a go. So I've said, therefore, there are different views as A suggests that the life of women had not changed. They did not have wealth to have independence to buy modern conveniences to improve their homes, whereas B suggests rich women had the money to be independent from men and could go to clubs and have independent sort of fashions and choice in their life. Okay, so that gives you a really nice idea. It takes 4 or 5 minutes to do in terms of the whole answer perhaps, and you should have rounded up all the marks. Okay, so what about question 2? So now here's an example of one. So it's using the same 2 interpretations. Now the question says, why might the authors of interpretation A and B have a different interpretation about the changing life of women in 1920s America? Explain your answer using interpretation A and B and your contextual knowledge. Okay, so now we need to think a bit more differently. So what do you think success criteria is this time about why they're different? So not how they're different, why? Why do they have a different idea? Okay, so again, success criteria, meeting the question criteria is really important. Have a think and list your ideas. What do you think is really important to answer this question successfully? Okay, so here's my ideas then. Firstly, and most importantly, it's asking you why they're different. It's not asking you how they're different. So you don't need to use the content of the source, the message. You're only talking now about the provenance of the source. Who wrote it? When they wrote it? The purpose of writing it? The bits of information around the interpretation is what you're looking at now. You only need to write one paragraph, but this time we are going to do a P paragraph. We're going to be explaining because it wants us to say why, so we need to explain. We need to talk about the provenance from both extracts and then explain why it leads to the different opinion. Okay, so this is relatively simple. Okay, so now have a look at both the provenances. So I've just given you the top bits, the provenance bits, the who, the where, the why. Now just be aware of, for the purpose of this video, I've made these up so that they're made up extracts, but they have clear ideas of provenance, the type of things you'd find in your exam. Okay, so have a look through. Why do you think they're different? Come up with some ideas. Pause me now and give it a go. Okay, so here's my ideas then. So A, the provenance is from a political activist. Therefore, should be keen to highlight problems, be keen to change things for America. So she is known for, as it says there, her political activism for rights for women. So she's not going to be thinking, 100% there, things are solved. No, she's still going to want more. So she's not going to be saying everything's wonderful. Whereas provenance B is from a rich flapper who obviously had the wealth and freedom not to notice the problems in America in the 1920s. She had a wonderful life. She was free. She was able to do what she wanted. So therefore, you're going to see two different views, okay, because of who they are and what their purpose is. Okay, let's give this a go at writing it. So we're still going to have this sort of writing frame, okay, with our point, evidence, explain. So we're going to say point A has a different view to B about the change in life of women in the 1920s because. Okay. Now, you'll notice there I'm not writing the whole word interpretation. I'd recommend not doing it. Maybe do it the first time you're writing. You can then start saying A and B, or you can say the author's name, because you don't want to be writing the word interpretation repeatedly. Okay, so once you've given your point about why they're different, maybe it's because of different people and different purposes, then say, for example, A is from this, whereas, important word, B is from this. This means a different view because, and explain with a couple of sentences. You might use your knowledge about the people and about sort of who they are and your understanding to explain. There might be some knowledge about the roles of women in there, but although the question says contextual knowledge, that's more about your understanding of the provenance than the events. Okay, so let's give this a go. So let's make a point now. So interpretation A has a different view to interpretation B about chain lives women in the 1920s because. So in your revision guide, give it a go now. See if you can answer this question with the opening sentence. Set out why they are different. They're different, who they are, purposes, experiences. Think about your opening sentence now. Okay, got your idea? So what I've written then is interpretation A has a different view to interpretation B about changing the lives of women in the 1920s because they are written by different people who have different experiences and purposes. Okay, so I've summarised all of what I've said in one sentence. Okay, so now let's talk about A and B. Okay, so you're going to say, for example, A says this, whereas B is this. Okay, so talk about the provenance of both now. Okay, and try and summarise them in two sentences, with the second sentence starting whereas. Okay, away you go. Okay, got your idea? So here's what I've written. It's quite, as you can see, quite concise. So it says, for example, A is by a woman who is a political activist and is keen to develop more equality for women still. Whereas B is by a lady who was a rich flapper in the 1920s. So very concise. Okay. I haven't copied out the whole of the provenance. I haven't wasted all my time. I want to do this whole answer in 6 minutes. So I've been concise. So now I want to explain. So we probably want a couple of sentences here to explain. So this means they have different views because, right? So pause me now, away you go. See if you can write a couple of sentences about why they're going to have different views based on who they are. How's it going to create their different experiences and ideas? Okay, away you go. Right, so what I've written is, this means they have different views about changes for women in the 1920s as A would like to convince people that there still were problems to solve in US society for women, as many women still did not have equality, whilst B is sharing their great experience and freedom in the 1920s as they had far more wealth so could live a life as a flapper. This means you get two very different views, as A is about normal women and B is about rich women. Okay, so it's 4 marks. That should be plenty to get the marks. You just need to have a good understanding of one of the provenance themes, whether that is who they are, when they're writing, or their purpose, to get a reason why they are different. Okay, well, I hope you found that useful. And it's, trying to be concise, trying to be writing in about 6 minutes, the whole answer, the reading, the planning, the writing, and in a nice sort of concise style. So you're timely in the exam. You should be getting 3 or 4 marks in these questions if you know what you're doing correctly. Now, look out for other videos where I'm looking at the theme of which is the most convincing with some other interpretations. So look out for those, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.